an original MCM production.
Now we are ready for our more formal program. We are very pleased to have this collection of well-informed, experienced folk to talk to us this morning. And we are also happy to have our moderator, Ms. Martha Love. And so, here we go. Martha.
Good morning, Community Brainstorming. Good morning, Community Brainstorming. Great, good. First off, I want to thank all of you for coming, because when the judge and I, Stamper, got here, there was about 4 people here, and my heart started beating real fast, and I was thinking, oh my gosh, no one wants to help eradicate human trafficking in our city, county, and state. But thank you so much for coming. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here to get your annual review about what accomplishments are being made in the area of human trafficking. You know that Wisconsin is like number 2 or 3 next to guns and drugs. So we have launched from the Human Trafficking Task Force, and Dana World Patterson is our chair, as well as she's the founder of Foundations for Freedom. We have every month brought together about 300 people so that we could have ongoing discussions about how are we going to inform the community about human trafficking. I want to thank the panel. They gave up their Saturday, and we really appreciate that. As you see, our panel are the experts in this state around trafficking and other issues that are domestic violence related. I want to give a special thanks to the judges that attend Community Brainstorming every month. It is extremely important that our judicial system hears what the community is saying so that they can act appropriately. I am very proud of the amount of time that the judges impose upon traffickers and people that impose domestic violence on women, men, and children. So can we have a round of applause? I want all of our judges to stand. Judges, please stand. Judges, please stand. I want everyone to know how important you are to this whole effort. You will hear today from Judge Rebecca Dallet what she and Judge Wall are doing as it relates to the judicial system and making sure that pimps get their fair share. I just want pimps to get their fair share. Their fair share. And if that's 80 years in jail, they deserve it. Because to take the innocence away and abduct men and women from our city, to have them go around the United States and have sex 10 or 15 times a day to earn money is not acceptable. So I hope they get their fair share. So with that, Commissioner Baker, one of the greatest men in this community, I want to thank him for coming this morning. He had an extremely busy schedule, and he's here with us, bow tie, yellow seersucker, suit coat, hair done to the max, smelling good, and as always, he's extremely informative, and he's our music man. Without any further ado, Commissioner of the City of Milwaukee that we love. Let's tell him we love him. Because you know he's married, got a wonderful wife, and he's here, and you know I don't want to get into no family stuff, but anyway, he's here. Thank you so much. Commissioner Baker.
I never know what Martha is going to say. And I only came because our Queen Bee, Dana World Patterson, when she calls, you have to come. But I'm certainly honored to be here with you this morning on behalf of our mayor, Tom Barrett, and all the men and women in the city. Happy to serve. I do have a prior engagement, so I am going to have to leave a little bit early. I'll stay as long as I can. Martha told me I had 10 minutes. I set my timer for 7 minutes, so if I go 10 minutes, that's amazing, but I'll try to share some things with you this morning. So, why did you get up this morning? Okay. I know there are a lot of answers to that question. You know, some of us got up because of the smell and the aroma of coffee that drives us to get up for that first cup. Some of us got up to exercise. Some of us got up to pray. Some of us got up to meditate. Some of us got up and kissed our partner, our husband, our wife. Some of us got up to kiss our children, our grandchildren, our adopted children, our foster children. Some of us got up because we're just blessed to get up. But I can give you 200,000 reasons to get up every day for the rest of our lives and do something. The greatest ethical challenge facing the globe today is human trafficking. The greatest challenge facing our city and our state and this nation is human trafficking. You see, human trafficking involves the use of human deception to exploit the vulnerable through force and stripping them of their dignity and self-worth. So when I got up this morning, all of those things that I said were precursors to the most important thing that I needed to do this morning was to do something about human trafficking. And if you get up from this day forward, and if your day does not include something to eradicate sex trafficking and human trafficking in Milwaukee and Wisconsin and the United States, then you may as well have not gotten up. The cry for help is drowned in a sea of constant oppression. And a general sense of apathy has been continuing for centuries. This didn't happen just yesterday, and it won't happen tomorrow if we do something about it. Blind faith leads victims into a pit of darkness, and caution is compromised by desperation. In other words, they're so desperate that they can't run or walk away even when the door is open for them to run or walk away. This is human trafficking. Let me say to all of us who are here, and I say this with reverence to our judges and our prosecutors and our lawyers in the room, that prostitutes are not criminals. Prostitutes are not criminals, but they're victims of the society that has allowed prostitution. We live in a country that specializes in creating broken people every single day of the year. That's our specialty, breaking people down to nothing. The more taboo a subject is, the more ugly a subject is, the more ugly a topic is, the less we want to talk about it. The more we can talk about the reality of sex trafficking, the more likely we are going to join the global community in doing something about it. Poverty lies at the heart of human trafficking. And in sex trafficking, women and children are merely reduced to gratifying the sexual pleasures and becoming a sexual commodity for the whole society. We become an organized billion-dollar industry, and at its core we have investors, unscrupulous recruiters, corrupt public officials, and principal participants. That last line, principal participants, is every single person within the sound of my voice. All of us are part of the problem. When we go into a store and we see sex selling, we stop and we look. Our videos, our music, our collateral is all about sex selling And the human and sex trafficking is a byproduct of the willing participation of the principles in the room, the principles in society, which is to say human trafficking is okay. If it wasn't okay, we would stop it. The most brutal form of sex trafficking is when we exploit children. Now, the sadists among us would say the popular belief, if you have sex with a virgin, you will not get a sexually transmitted disease. Well, let me give you some data on that. Milwaukee ranks 4th in gonorrhea infection. We rank 3rd in chlamydia infection, and we are one of the highest ranked cities regarding men who have sex with men and HIV. You may have sex with a virgin, but you're having sex with somebody else too. So sexually transmitted diseases is not the way for the sadists in the room to think that you can get around it. Little girls are raped and tortured to the extent that their reproductive systems are permanently damaged, depriving them of the natural right to be mothers in our community. The incidence of sexual exploitation of young boys is seldom heard of because it's a complete failure to acknowledge the existence, which is fueled by gender-biased assumptions that males can never be victims. Any human being can be a victim of sex trafficking and human trafficking. And we don't want to say that little boys are dressing up for men who get off on that notion right here in this community. And I know this is difficult to talk about, but this pit of darkness must have light shined on it. And it bothers me that we can wake up and not do something every single day of the week to stop this. There's no doubt we live in a world that specializes in breaking down people every day. We've reached the point that eradicating human trafficking is no longer restricted to few individuals willing to do something and a few organizations. Anyone, in any way, that can help to minimize this condition is a winner. If you can crawl, walk, talk, speak, grunt, moan, yell, if you can do anything, you can help us stop this. What wouldn't you do to save those that you love? And if human trafficking happens on our watch, if it happens in this city, if it happens in this state, in this nation, then we're part of the problem. The most recent statistics say that Milwaukee, as Martha said, is that growing capital, that we have rankings and distinction of being the place that people want to come and learn on how to honor their craft. Girls, 17 and under, 12 to 17 being exact age where on the north side of Milwaukee, where most of the youth are identified. 70% of them reported missing by the police department once during their lifetime. Once during their lifetime. 10-year-olds reported missing. My son is 10 years old. He can't find his shoes in the morning. That's so close to having anything missing in his life. But yet we have children missing in Milwaukee, and they can't be found. But we can find anything we want in a nanosecond by picking up our smartphone and searching and having it delivered to our doors by drones, but we can't stop human trafficking. People respect what you inspect. And what we're inspecting is being willing principal participants to the darkest days of the history of this country, which is human and sexual trafficking. It is our modern day slavery. It is the dirty linen that must be clean. And it is something that I can't live with and don't want to die with. And you should feel the same way. When the truth is acknowledged, you must and you will and you always will have to do something. The hardest part of life is acknowledging the truth. The easiest part is doing something about the truth. There are lies being told from Washington to Milwaukee. And in between all of those lies is the truth. And if we acknowledge the truth about human trafficking and sex trafficking in Milwaukee, in Wisconsin, in the United States, then we will always do something. And that's what today is about, doing something. It is about me telling my great-grandchildren one day that I live by a great city, by a great lake. And when faced with the most unimaginable problem in our time, I did something. I found that intersection between the truth and lies. and I walked up to the truth and I did something. This is Milwaukee. This is the city we love. This is the place we'll live, die, and play, and work, and do everything in between. But we cannot, we should not allow this to happen on our watch. We are better than that. You're better than that, and I'm better than that. And I'm honored to join you. So tomorrow, when you wake up, whether it be for the aroma of coffee, to kiss your partner, your wife, your spouse, to hug your children, grandchildren, to exercise, pray, or meditate, let the truth lead you to doing something about human trafficking. Thank you.
Let's give it up for the commissioner. One more time. I believe the Commissioner Baker has framed what human trafficking is, and I think he called us to action in terms of, if you see something, say something, do something. And this subject is hard to talk about, but I don't care. And I don't care if people are uncomfortable, but in order to save our children, to give them a fair chance, children should be funny, laughing, running, and playing, not locked in a basement servicing different people in our community. And I'm sure a number of you have heard all kinds of reports lately. And I appreciate how the press is identifying what's happening to our children. They are telling the truth about the capture and other things that are occurring in this city for boys and girls. So this panel today, I did kind of introduce them, but they will certainly introduce themselves. We're fortunate to have our judges that have done something about human trafficking and even have gone around the United States training other judges to be aware of some of the signs as it relates to cases that they get. So I now would like to bring up, before I bring a lot of other people up, Rebecca Dallet, Judge Rebecca Dallet. And we remember when we elected Judge Rebecca Dallet, and now look at her 10 years later, she's running for the Supreme Court. My, as Dana would say. Judge Rebecca Dallet.
Thank you, Martha.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. I am very happy to be here. Martha has done this panel before. I was happy to be a part of it then too. I think it's really important, as Josh was saying and as Commissioner Baker has saying, just all of you being here to listen and to hear. And what I'm going to do, I know that Judge Wall is going to talk as well. We won't overlap information. I'm just going to give you a sense of what it is like in Milwaukee County courts for human trafficking. I covered a homicide sexual assault rotation for 2 years. I was, I think, I had one of the first human trafficking cases back in 2009. And then I had one or two. And then by the time I did the rotation again, I had 4 or 5. And I pulled the statistics at the end of last week and saw that we're already, I think, 6 or 7 in cases right now in the beginning of 2017 up until now. And so we're on track. Unfortunately, we might have our biggest year if it keeps at that pace. So we are certainly a place where we are attracting these pimps that come in. What this looks like, just from a practical perspective, the cases that I handled, it is mostly teenage girls. That seems to be the population. And if we all have, I have teenagers, one of them's here with me, my daughter Ellie. If we have teenagers or no teenagers, or remember being a teenager, because we all were, we know that that's a time in your life where you are really trying to find yourself and where you are trying to distinguish yourself from your family and where you might feel lost and you might feel hopeless at times. And this is what they prey on. And I'm telling you that this does not affect socioeconomic status in any way. This does not affect race. I mean, I'm saying affects everyone across the board. So socioeconomic status, race, sexual preference, boys, girls, it doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. And that's why as a community, we absolutely need to be aware of that. They have a system set up. The systematic part of it is a scary part of it. Because it is being taught. We have people teaching how to be pimps and how to perpetuate this systematic manipulation and exploitation of our teenagers, boys and girls. And they do that by having a system in place. It's terrible language. It's language that they use. It's like being in a foreign country when you sit in one of these trials. They like the pimp likes to be called daddy. He gets the girls to call him daddy. He's their daddy. Think about the connotations behind that and just what that means. They're lured in by promises. The promises obviously are not kept. The promises, I had one girl who was a dancer, and she, I think, was the one headed to college the next month. I am telling you, at all kinds of people doing all kinds of things, but she was a dancer and she wanted to dance. And so he met her, I can't remember where, and told her he was going to make her a dancer. And so he got her there, and the luring in is part of the process, and it's what appeals to them. The other thing that they do is they make them, give them lots of clothing and kind of lure them in with this promise of this wonderful life. And for a while, I think it is. During the grooming process, they date them and they show them this wonderful time and they tell them how they're going to get them these jobs and give them these clothes. And it's very much like, I'm glad that Martha mentioned domestic violence, which I also do that training across the country for judges to get them educated on it. Domestic violence plays a part of this too, because this is all about a manipulation. So they lure them in, and then once they're there, they are sold essentially to people in the community who will pay for sex acts. They don't get to keep any of the money. They wind up not living these wonderful lives they were promised, not being dancers. They wind up having to perform sex acts every day. They do it on what's called the track, and the tracks are known by the police officers where they walk the track, and that's where the prostitutes are. So we are absolutely right, Commissioner Baker, when you see prostitutes in our community, they are not people that like to have sex. They are people who are being manipulated, and I bet you that almost all of them, if not all of them, are not keeping those profits at all. These women would have to hand over all of what they made. They were given no money, no resources. They were lucky if they were bought clothes, and lucky if they were allowed any kind of outside contact, because the domestic violence piece fits in here. There's an extreme amount of control and manipulation. So they lose touch with their families. That's why they're reported missing. They're not allowed to talk to their friends. And they're scared. They're scared. I had one victim who sat next to me and she kept throwing up. That's how nervous and afraid she is. We kept having to stop court. And she, just being up there talking about what had happened to her was just devastating. It's hard for them to talk about. We have an issue, just like we have in domestic violence court, where I was for 3.5 years, with people wanting to even come forward. So, and understandably so, but it makes it hard to bring these pimps to justice. But we have dedicated police officers here in Milwaukee County. We have education. Our judges, we work really hard. We do not want to send prostitutes to jail. We want to send pimps to prison and do what Martha said and give them their absolute fair share. And that's what we work hard to do every day. So I don't know how long, I didn't put my clock on, but I'm good? Okay, good. So, I mean, that's the essence of it. I think that we should be aware that of how this works. The malls are actually a place. We should all be aware of that. Bayshore is a place. Absolutely is a place. And I will tell you what that looks like, too, from my experience. The man oftentimes is not the person recruiting. It is oftentimes, she is known as the bottom bitch. That is an honorable, that's the highest ranking person in the house besides the pimp, the bottom bitch. And she's the one who's responsible sometimes to go out and lure in these other girls and boys to come and be part of this stable, which is what they're called. And I'll just listen to the references here. These are animal references. This is how, and I think that's how people can do these terrible things. I don't know, but just sitting in court and watching is to dehumanize. That's the only way I think anybody can ever do terrible things to another person, is to somehow not acknowledge their personhood, who they are, their humanness. And so we call them things like bottom bitch and part of a stable, and they're branded. They're branded. I had I'm trying to think of the name of the charge. One of the charges that I had involved branding, and there was a charge that the DAs had put in that of this is my part of my stable, so I'm going to brand them with a hot iron. I mean, it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable, and it's absolutely occurring, and it is something that I think the best we can do as a community here is just be really aware, be educated, understand, keep eyes on our kids and our teens especially, be there for them in ways that I know that services have been set up, and I know Dana World, Patterson, and Martha and others have just done a great job, and I know Rachel Monaco Wilson has set up wonderful services to try to really help educate. And it's about educating those girls, it's about educating their families, and it's about educating the boys and the men in the community too, that there is no such thing as someone just giving away sex because they want to give away sex. That there's something behind it, and that we need to be aware of all that. And in our courts, we continue to work really hard to hold all pimps accountable and to make sure that this problem is, hopefully we can eradicate this in all over our country, but let's start here in Milwaukee and all across the state of Wisconsin. So I thank you so much for being here today also.
It's always a privilege to have Rebecca Dallet here. She's been consistent. Ever since she's been elected, I'm having a little trouble here. Can somebody help me? Or maybe I'm okay, Kurt. Maybe I'm okay. She's been coming to community brainstorming ever since she's been elected. She appears upon request at different forums to talk about the training that she has done, and she talks about just what she talked about to the community, helping Dana World, Patterson, and I make sure that we keep it straight, and that that there's that outreach. We also have Tim Burns here, as you all know. He's also running for the Supreme Court. Tim, do you have any thoughts about human trafficking? I'm trying to be fair. Okay.
So this isn't the Tim Burns show. I actually have a question for the panel that's very near and dear to my heart. My wife and I adopted 3 children from China. And so my experience with sex trafficking has been, when I visited those orphanages each time adopting my children, I felt the vulnerability of those children to becoming victims of sex trafficking. And when I looked at it, one thing kept occurring to me. When a government passes a policy like China's one-child policy, when a society year after year treat young girls and women as second-class citizens, it creates that vulnerability. And I am all for accountability for these crimes, but are there things we should be doing as policy matters to make it so this is much, much less of a problem or no problem in our country? If I could point at anything in China, it would have been their one-child policy, which you all know has mostly gone out of effect now. Is there something here? Is it the hopelessness? Is it the lack of jobs? Is it the shrinking of the middle class economy? are there things we should be changing on the front end to stop this horrible problem?
Thank you so much. Thank you, Tim Burns. Okay, the next person we'll hear from is my ride and die person, friend, the chair of the Human Trafficking Task Force of Greater Milwaukee, the founder of Foundations for Freedom, minister in our community, she and her husband, just a 100% outreach person to save the world and especially our children. It's Dana World Patterson.
Good morning, everyone. I'm glad to be here. And I think about the opportunity that community brainstorming presents to get the word out and just share with those who care. Thank you so much. After 9 years of being on the front line, we have only begun to scratch the surface in the fight against human sex trafficking. If there were only one soul still out there trafficked, our fight against this abomination would continue. But the ugly truth is that there are millions. Millions, 27 million reasons why. 27 million women and girls worldwide. This number is an atrocity and gives me and gives us wind beneath our wings daily. And the boys and the men are saying, don't leave us out of the equation of victimization. And we're not. We have grown in knowledge. We have grown in understanding. And the evidence is present, supporting the ugly demise of victimization of boys and men and how they have been groomed. Unfortunately, along with that conversation, males also lead as traffickers, perpetrators, strip club goers, and pornography watchers. And we'll talk about that a little bit later. Our evidence has intersected, or I would say it has collided with more horrific truths, and we're still on the front lines endeavoring to change what we know so far. So if any man went down to pick up a rock to throw at me, just put it down. No. In America, every 98 seconds, someone is being sexually assaulted. This frequency includes both genders. And every 8 minutes, that victim is a child. It begins to look like an estimated 1 in 4 girls. And if we were to count, we would see how prevalent that is right here in that room, in this room. And it looks like 1 in 5 or 6 boys are affected by sexual abuse by the time they reach the age 18. One trafficker said, sexual abuse at an early age by someone they trust like a father, grandfather, or uncle works in their favor to conform a person to the life of prostitution or being a whore. Human trafficking exists in every state and nearly every city. If we open our eyes, we'll see it in small towns and countrysides, in 5-bedroom homes and where eating on china is preferred. Black girls lead the statistics, but all are welcome here. Every nationality, ethnicity, shapes, sizes, hues of skin tone, and fetishes are on the menu. You can be very young or not young at all. Mental illness, physical disabilities, drug addicted. It doesn't matter. Grooming begins where vulnerabilities are revealed. And shh, if you tell anyone I'll kill you, is respected. White picket fences are admired, but an invisible fence keeps many in the life for years. now a devout community leader, James Nelson, said trickery springs a trap that leads to the process of turning tricks. I'm going to say that again. Trickery springs a trap which leads to the process of turning tricks. In Wisconsin, several years ago, before former Attorney General J.B. Van Hollen said human trafficking exists in all 72 counties in Wisconsin, Martha Love and I, we were on the path. And it was beyond, and we knew that this was beyond the narrative that highlighted inner city, black girls, stricken with poverty and no father. That's all we were hearing. But 9 years ago, $32 billion came into the conversation. $32 billion came into the conversation, and that number was the average worldwide that was being garnered by men, women, boys, and girls. So here we are beating the drum saying, not in our neighborhood, not in yours. Not in our neighborhood, not in yours, because that kind of money we knew that it was far greater than the inner city black girl, no father, eating flour and water. Not in our city, not in yours. And unfortunately, the facts cannot be denied. We now speak of this industry garnering $150 billion on the backs of women, girls, men, boys, and those in the LGBT community. No one is exempt, and the trafficker cares less of your zip code. It's all about the green, mean dollar. It's all about money. In short, it's in your backyard. This fact we have to believe. We have to believe. Yes, Milwaukee is considered the Harvard of pimp school. Wisconsin is considered a hub where human trafficking prevails. You have to believe that this is happening in your backyard. You must. So what is it? What is this it? I believe human trafficking is one of the worst atrocities happening in the world today. It is deliberate control, manipulation, force, fraud, coercion, and torture of a human being whose rights have been taken by another human being. President Clinton signed the Trafficking Victims Protection Act in 2000, which provided protection and prosecution for victims when force, fraud, or coercion were present to induce commercial sex for the exchange of money. What you have to understand is force, fraud, and coercion is not necessary to be proven for children. Connections are made at, what we know for sure is the borders have been erased, but the tracks and the grooves from strip club to strip club, up and down the highways, motels, hotels, and in studios where pornography is produced. Connections are made at grocery stores, restaurants, shopping centers, casinos, and at truck stops, where they said lizards roam from lot to lot and from truck to truck. It is happening in the front of cars with heads face down, parking lots, apartments, and in basements. It is happening in plain sight from those dressed sleazy, those carrying books at the university, to those sleeping on a couch to protect them from the dark one more night. So as I turn the page to a close, we can all do something to eradicate human trafficking in our communities. We can all do something. One, you can care. Don't wait for it to be your daughter, your niece, your cousin, your neighbor. If you see something, as Martha said, say something, do something. Call 911, reach out to someone. Do something. Two, learn more. And as much as you can, to be aware of the signs and to be able to speak in an informed manner with facts. You can tell that we don't have to sensationalize this at all. It's gruesome enough. Just tell the truth. Come to the human trafficking meetings. We meet every 4th Tuesday. You can also make a donation. Put your money where your mouth is. Create opportunities and or volunteer at a not-for-profit, like A Cry for Help, Inner Beauty, the Benedict Center, Grateful Girls, or Foundations for Freedom. Lastly, this summer we've started a campaign. It's called Men for Men, End the Demand. This summer campaign is designed for men to talk to men about the ills of human trafficking, about the appetites that men have, about their addictions, and so on and so forth. Martha and I said we can have these conversations, but we don't even want to be a fly on the wall if men will begin to tell the truth. So we said if men will begin to talk to men in a way that is honest and truthful and non-judgmental, we believe that individuals will begin to come out, because we know that there are many with addictions in churches. We know that there are those that, and because of the internet, that are behind this screen watching what's going on. That's a direct intersection to human trafficking. But if men will talk to men in a way that is uplifting, honest but uplifting, so that they're supported, we believe that this will begin to turn the needle, move the needle closer to ending human sex trafficking, ending sexual exploitation. So we're asking that men will stand publicly, that they will read the pledge, sign it, and if they agree, they're gonna get a t-shirt. Come on, stand up, Dennis. They're gonna get a t-shirt. You're gonna be on social media. James has the t-shirt. Bevan has signed, Commissioner Baker has signed the pledge. He has the t-shirt. We want men to stand up, men for men, to eradicate human sex trafficking. Now, those of you, we have the pledges here today, and we have t-shirts. Who will stand publicly against human sex trafficking? Get on your feet. Men. Well, all right. Well, all right. All right, all right, all right. Thank you. Be sure to see me afterwards, and let's just keep the fight going. There are some that say, we don't know about human trafficking. Well, get from under a rock and learn about it. All right? God bless you.
So you see why when the Silk Club owners see Dana and I, they kind of run, because we're taking our signs, not in my community. Dana, thank you so much for your commitment to the children of the state of Wisconsin. Thank you for all that you're doing. I appreciate being a friend of yours. Okay. The ACLU, and we have the former executive director, is one of our champions in terms of going to the schools and talking to the children about their rights. And Chris, we appreciate it. We appreciate your one that's currently in office. His name is Chris too, right? And do you want to say anything about the ACLU's position on eradication of human trafficking or the violation of one's rights?
Thank you, Martha, and good morning. I'm Chris Amity, and I'm the former executive director there, so I feel a little bit removed from what's happening with ACLU. But with ACLU, it's important to remember that we try to prevent violations of rights as well as addressing the issues once they've happened. And that's why I think I'm particularly happy that over the years we've tried to do things with schools and with education and with our Youth Social Justice Forum to raise the profile of work against human and sex trafficking. So that's what our focus has been. I know we can't do everything, but I know that with all the different things that we've got going on, that we're very happy that we can do as much as we do and work with people like Martha on this issue. Thank you.
We appreciate all of the work, and we know about it because Dana and I are involved in being presenters in workshops at the teen presentation that's done at the university area. And we heard, Dana and I did a presentation, and we heard that our workshop was the best. So everybody, that was the feedback, you know, when the survey took place. I just also want to announce that on the back table for any students and others that are here, I have literature about trafficking so that you can take for your class so that you'll be able to kind of explain some of the stuff that took place. So I want to introduce to you now a young man that's an absolute leader in our community, and his name is Dennis Walton. And I appreciate my relationship with Dennis Walton. He's a father. He's a person that really understands a lot of things that's going on. And his greatest work and his greatest mission is to help save our children in our community and also to work with men so that men understand they cannot violate our community. We appreciate everything that Dennis is doing. He's on a new journey now. So Dennis, without any further ado, if you want to come on up and give us your words.
Ooh, good morning, everybody. First of all, I just want to thank you for even allowing me to be here. I'm not as politically correct as everybody, so forgive me. But I do, when we talk about this issue of human sex trafficking, anybody who knows me knows that this is something that I hate, you know, and that I've advocated against from the very beginning. You know, I have the opportunity, or have had the opportunity over the last several years to work with thousands and thousands of men, fathers, when we talk about the restoration of family and the importance of the family institution and the role that men play in our community and in our society. When we talk about how we need to reset and renew ourselves. And when we think about the idea of our children, our women, anybody being victimized in this way, there's no reason why this basement is not packed right now. And I'm upset about that. We're in the heart of the 53206 community. As you know, there are many different issues that affect this community. There's a predominantly black community here. But when I look around in this audience right here, I don't see a reflection of this community. I see a reflection of outside interest that's in this community, and we welcome that, but that's a problem. It's a problem when when we don't have black men who represent this community packed in this basement right now. That's a serious problem. When we're talking about ending the violation of our 2-year-old, 3-year-old, 4-year-old, 5-year-old, 6-year-old daughters and sons, 7-year-old, 8-year-old, 9-year-olds, when you think about the victimization of children that happens every day. You know, one of the things that I do is I work within the correctional facilities with men, helping prepare them for their transition back into the community. And most recently, I graduated a group of men out of our fatherhood program. And in this class, I have 47 fathers who were in my class to take a parenting class. And amongst those 47 fathers, I added up the children, and there were 209 children amongst 47 men. Just want to think about that. There were 209 children amongst 47 men. So while there were 47 men incarcerated, there were 209 children who are out in these streets without the guidance and protection and the nurturing of their father or the protection of their father. And one of the things that I speak to these men about, I said, how are you going to feel if you get the phone call while you in here doing 18 months or 21 months on the bunk bed with another man, and you find out that your 4-year-old, 5-year-old, or 6-year-old daughter was just sexually abused, made to perform oral sex by a boyfriend who you couldn't protect your child from, who was in the house with the mother of your child. How are you going to feel if you find out that your child was raped while you in here on the bunk bed with another man for 18 months? And you found out that your daughter was made to perform oral sex and she's 6 or 7 years old, or she was anally raped at 8 and 9 years old. And then I say, now think about it like this. Now, imagine you get that same phone call and it's your son. Because just as much as it happens to our young women, it happens to our young men. You know, and there's a responsibility and a role that we have to play to be honest about how serious this is when we talk about how it is destroying our communities, how it is affecting our communities. I'm not here because it's politically correct for me to be here. I'm here because I'm a father. I have 3 children. I have a 15-year-old son, a 13-year-old daughter, and a 6-year-old son who I love dearly and who I never want to see go without my protection or my guidance. Now, I'm very glad to see that we have judges who are here today, you know, who are assessing these situations every day. And I think that there needs to be balance when we have this conversation about human sex trafficking, because what I don't want to see is there be an imbalance and that we create a continuous of disparate sentencing amongst certain groups of people. Because when you look at the origin of pimping or hoeing or sex trafficking, and you look at it from a perspective of poverty and people who have been conditioned this way, and how it's generational in a lot of ways, and how it stems from poverty in a lot of ways, and ignorance. Why is it that a young man decides to grow up and become a pimp? What type of trauma has he dealt with in his life? How many times has he been molested by a man or a woman? There are generations of women who groom young men to become pimps. Okay? When we see our young women out here behaving in different ways out in these streets, or when they're not performing well in school and we're suspending them and we're kicking them out, you don't know if that child just got sexually assaulted or raped by her grandfather. But when we talk about understanding this and bringing balance to it, we have to deal with the root of the problems, and the root is going to have to come from us. Understanding the root comes from us educating ourselves on how deep this is systemically, and the trauma that has occurred that has changed the mindset of so many of our people in the community today. Why are our young women glorifying being hoes? Why do you see 9 and 10 and 11-year-old girls with thongs on? Why do you see 13 or 14-year-old young women with stilettos on and wigs and weaves hanging down to their behind? What is that psychology? What are we doing? Where's the balance? I think we have to look at the root of these problems and not just look at the symptoms of the problem. And a lot of times it goes beyond just you see a pimp or you see a hoe. There's some trauma that has affected these people in their lives that we have to go deeper into, and we can't just incarcerate our way out of it. We have to deal with this in a way that's intelligent when we talk about healing our community and renewing ourselves. Then we also have to look at the fact that what is the marketplace for human sex trafficking? Yeah, we have issues here in 53206, but this is a high-end market. What you said, $32 billion? is going into this industry, this is a high-end market for little boys and little girls. And we look at the pimps, we look at the women who are selling their body, but what about the market, the person who's purchasing these people? What about the people that's in high places where this is their recipe, this is their taste, this is their flavor? A 3-year-old boy, a 6-year-old girl. I just read a story the other day, no offense to the judges, about a judge who flew out of the country repeatedly to go to one of those villages overseas and have sex with little children. So we don't want to just we don't want to just demonize and make villains out of one segment of people, but we have to look at this as something that's, like you said, beyond just one group. There's a high-end market for little boys and little girls and sex trafficking. And yes, we as men have a responsibility. And the fact that you don't see as many men that can fill this room here today is a problem. Okay? It's a problem. And it's a problem that needs to be called out. It needs to be addressed. And we can't keep on trying to be politically correct about everything. You out of order. Plain and simple. You're out of order. Why is not the mayor here? Why is not all of the elected officials here? We're talking about human sex trafficking, the distribution of our children for sexual purposes, the victimization and the violent attack and assault sexually on our children and our communities. And we don't have every elected official in this basement today standing up, but you wait till election time and you have this conversation. That's why I'm glad to see that those of you who are here, who are running for office, are here now. I get it. I appreciate it because we need you here. But we also have to hold those accountable in our community who knock on our doors right before election time and tell us how much they love and care about our community, but they can't come out this morning and take a stand. That doesn't have to be a political stand, but it has to be a moral stand. And that's part of the problem. We got too many people that's turning their head, turning their back, too many people in high positions that are not allowing for this issue to get its proper due, or, you know, the right justice to come forward. So me, as a man, I'm going to be out here fighting every day, no matter what, whether it's politically to change things or just grassroots in the way that I do. And I know that family restoration and renewing our family is the solution to this problem. And our role as men is to bring forth that healing and reset in our community. So I'm, like I said, I'm not politically correct. Let me get off the mic, because I'm about to go off about this issue.
You see what happens? I don't blame him, but I had to catch him because I knew how he felt. And we appreciate Dennis very, very much. Also, Brother Muhammad, David Muhammad, has come in. He's from the Office on Violence Prevention. Is that correct? We appreciate all that you do working with our youth in this community. Thank you. Thank you. Also, we appreciate all that our Muslim brothers, Brother William Muhammad and the group do around talking to men about sex trafficking in our community. We really appreciate it. So without any further ado, can we have Judge Joseph Wall come up? But prior to that, Bevan Baker has to leave, and I want him to say one more thing in summary about today's panel.
Thank you, Martha. And the passion in the room is undeniable, and the challenge ahead of us is not insurmountable. I'll say those things. Let me just leave you with this. You know, the business of public health is to take what's accepted and make it unacceptable. The business of public health is to take what is accepted and make it unacceptable. And that's what we have to do as a community. I do want to make mention of how this is a global concern. It's not just Milwaukee. Milwaukee finds out what others are doing, and we try to do it, emulate it, and this is everywhere we go. You can't run away from it. We got to run to it and do something about it. 39,000. I want you to take that number, 39,000, and remember it for the rest of the day. 39,000 is the number of times that the Ole Miss head football coach, Hugh Freeze, dialed an escort service. He resigned this week rather abruptly. He initially said he misdialed the number, and then after they got the phone records, he dialed an escort service 39,000 times. His job as head football coach, he plays multi-million dollars to lead young men into the gridiron battlefield and to set futures for men who play football, and to be a glowing example, getting back to what James said earlier, and what Dennis said earlier, I'm sorry. And so 39,000 times he called. I hope he gets the help that he needs. But this is something that's happening in our community. I did want to make mention of this whole issue of global, and a gentleman who spoke earlier about adoptions and taking what he's seen internationally. I've seen that. I've been there. I've been to countries where this exists, but not on our front porch. We are sitting on the front porch of opportunity to fix this while we go out on the back porch of the Nile and do nothing. This is our Milwaukee, and this is what we have to do. I'm honored to work with you, to do everything I can. Later this summer, the Blueprint for Peace, the Milwaukee Health Department's Office of Violence Prevention, will submit its plan to deal with violence in this community. There is a portion of that plan that deals with human trafficking. When that blueprint for violence is released to this community, there will be many who say it's not enough, or it's too much, or we can't do that, or we should do this. There's going to be a lot of comments about that blueprint for peace. Let me say this. Anyone who's hungry should not necessarily go back and curse the cook. We have to work to make certain that the blueprint for peace is a blueprint for Milwaukee. We can take criticism, but we can't take people doing nothing. So when that plan comes out, do a la carte. Take what you like and leave what you don't, but make certain that you eat and do something to save this city. None of us are perfect. Only our Supreme Being is perfect. He's opened the doors through his divine intervention to give us the knowledge to seek that perfection after this life. But in this life, we have only one chance. And that chance is now for us to do something about this horrible issue of human trafficking. And I do thank you. So I'm sorry I have to leave. I'm motivated when I come here because the intersection between the work that I do and Dennis, you can be my alter ego. Can we travel together? And you can say the things that I want to say. But I do appreciate you all. And again, it has never been about the number of people in the room. It's the people in the room that matter. So we don't need 10,000 people. We need 10 people who believe that they can move mountains like 10,000 people. Thank you very much.
What a man, what a man, what a man. What a man, what a man. Tamika, what's your friend's name sitting over there? The young lady that worked on the Fine Gold campaign, I think, right? Sister, you want to stand up? You're among your sisters. Your name is? How do you find this program? Fantastic. Thank you for coming. She said you were coming. You're a little bit late, but she said you were coming. I'm glad you made it. All right, thank you. I want to give a report from the field. I thought our person would be here to give you a report from the field. And the field is this: 5 sex workers that are now heroin addicts, that's homeless, that's living in the Lisbon Street area, in a garage in the back off the alley. They were taken to Keenan Health Center to be treated for different venereal diseases. Keenan Health Center treated these women, plus gave a Cry for Help. The founder of Cry for Help, Bianca Williams, gave her a card so that she could pay for the 5 sex workers' prescriptions. Bianca checked on these women, and 30% say they are taking their medications so that they can continue their journey of providing sex in the Lisbon Street area. That's a report from the field, which is quite interesting. And these are victims that you see out on the streets. And Bianca is working with them, and we're hoping soon that they will come in out of the rain and be treated for their human trafficking, their prostitution, all of the things that are happening to them in their lives at this time. So at this time, I would like to bring up Judge Joseph Wall, who just came back from the U.S. Attorney's Office and who was sworn in as a circuit court judge in Branch 20. Come on up, please.
Good morning. I want to first thank Community Brainstorming for inviting me here today. I want to thank the ever energetic and passionate Martha Love for also reaching out to talk to me. And I want to note that the next time I'm on a panel with Dana World Patterson, I'm going to try to speak before her because I don't see how anybody can follow her at a mic. I also want to point out Judge Fred Kessler, who's in the back. Judge Kessler Judge Kessler, as you probably all know, has been in public service his entire adult life. Both as a judge, he now serves in the Wisconsin legislature. One of the reasons I point him out is he's been part of the drafting and the refinement of the new Wisconsin human trafficking statute. And he deserves our attention, our praise, and our thanks for putting that in the criminal code. I was a federal prosecutor for 25 years, and now I've gone back to the circuit court. Sometimes I feel like I'm a federal prosecutor who's currently assigned to the Milwaukee County Circuit Court bench. But as a federal prosecutor, my specialty over those 25 years were the prosecution of large-scale drug cases and the prosecution of white-collar crime, financial frauds. And that took up the majority of my time until the spring of 2008, when a small group of Milwaukee police detectives and FBI agents approached me and asked if I would be interested in hearing what they are doing in Milwaukee. And I said yes, and we met, and they were a very motivated, very experienced, an incredibly outraged group of law enforcement officers. And what they told me was so shocking. The facts of it were so shocking, and the fact that in 2008, I had been involved in the criminal justice system for 24 years, both as a prosecutor and as a judge, including 4 years at children's court. And the things they were telling me, I did not know after all that time. And they told me that the problem of sex trafficking in Milwaukee County especially, and the fact that nobody was prosecuting pimps. Instead, they were prosecuting the women who were being pimped out. And as we talked, I told them that I would start taking their cases. There were a number of cases that were actually in the U.S. Attorney's Office that weren't being worked on. And I took those and I brought those on my calendar. And for 9 years, I worked with this group in the investigation and the prosecution of sex trafficking crimes. During that time, I convicted 13 individuals under the federal statutes, while at the same time doing my Ponzi scheme prosecutions. And I think 13 convictions is probably one of the highest in the country in terms of federal court, not state courts. During that time, I interviewed more than 120 prostituted females, and approximately half of them were minors. Now, I use the word prostituted. I'm sure many of you have heard the old saying that prostitution is the oldest profession in the world. Well, after I understood the problem, I realized it was probably the second oldest, because pimping had to be the oldest, because behind nearly every prostituted person, there's a pimp who has led them into this horrific life. And that's the oldest profession. I should note that, and while I don't criticize anybody, I almost never use the word prostitute. I will use the words prostituted, put it in the passive voice, prostituted female, prostituted victim. I don't use the words sex worker, which people are trying to come to a politically correct name for these victimized people, almost all females, minors and adults. And as I say, I don't criticize anybody for using the word prostitute, but again, as a habit, I put it in the passive voice to show that they are being acted upon by somebody else, the prostituted victims. I want to talk just first of all, I want to mention, in terms of what I've seen over the years, that there is an epidemic in Milwaukee of child sex trafficking. It is an epidemic. And our young girls are low-hanging fruit for these monsters who would pluck them off the street, out of the malls, out of the Greyhound station, and shower them with false love, attention, and affection. As Dana World Patterson said, you will hear the words that Milwaukee is the Harvard of sex trafficking. One of the supervisors at our Boys and Girls Club was quoted as saying that about 3-4 years ago. Milwaukee is the Harvard of child sex trafficking. Oftentimes, if you go to other cities for training and you listen to law enforcement officers from other cities, you will sometimes hear the following. When it comes to pimping and prostitution, all roads lead back to Milwaukee. What an awful thing to be known for. It's an exaggeration, of course, but that is a perception out there of our city among those who are involved in these type of cases these type of investigations or those providing services to the victims. I want to just talk about some commonalities among the victims, and there's exceptions to every single commonality. And again, like I say, I've interviewed more than 120 victims. I put almost that many in the grand jury and had them testify in front of grand jurors under oath about their role under their respective pimps. And first of all, white, black, Hispanic, it strikes across all nationalities, all backgrounds. Asian, there's really no one that really sticks out. What I've seen is the ones that are being picked out are ages. The youngest I talked to was 14, and she had been prostituted when she was 13. That was the youngest I've seen here in Milwaukee. But these pimps are looking for younger women. Of course, they're looking for the more attractive, the more money they'll make, because these women are simply dollar signs to these monsters. But one of the things that is a commonality is that many or most of these young ladies don't have any male role models in their life. They don't have a strong man who has been in their life. Many of them have never met their father, and there has not been somebody else in the extended family or in the neighborhood who has taken an interest in them and given them attention and given them affection, something that as human beings we know that we all yearn for. Oftentimes they'll have a mother who is struggling, maybe working 2 or 3 jobs to support her family, maybe struggling with drug or alcohol addiction or issues such as depression, and their mothers are oftentimes not in the picture. You will see as a commonality financial problems in this family, in this extended family. 3 of our speakers, Ms. Patterson, Commissioner Baker, Mr. Walton, have all mentioned poverty. And I have to echo that at the end of it all, we are seeing victims of poverty. Young ladies who've been raised in poverty, who've grown up in poverty, and who are struggling in poverty, and who are in a crisis. And what they're looking for, as I say, these are low-hanging fruit. They're looking for a strong, attentive, loving male figure. That is a big thing that they're looking for, to replace what they do not have. They're looking and are susceptible to the lure of a family unit. And a couple of our speakers have, Judge Dallet talked about some of the terms and the jargons used in sex trafficking. Nearly every pimp that I've prosecuted, his victims were required to call him daddy. And when there was a woman in this unit of victims, so oftentimes a bit older than the rest, oftentimes the one who has been with the particular pimp for the longest, may have children, often do have children by the pimp, one way to keep them attached. With that stronger woman, in somewhat of a leadership position, you are seeing a facsimile of a family unit with daddy and this stronger, attentive female. And these young girls are looking for companionship, they're looking for attention, they're looking for love. And because they've, for the most part, and again there's exceptions, I One of my victims in an early case was a product of a strong family. Father was a minister. Mother was very involved in her life, but she got sucked in. She was 15. She got sucked in by a very, very smooth-talking pimp who had her pregnant by the age of 16. So there's exceptions to everything I'm talking about. But this is what they're looking for. And this is the problem that we have in Milwaukee. And one of the reasons is poverty and the lack of attention that we are giving to these vulnerable females. In the prosecutions I've had, again, I started in 2008, and in meeting with this law enforcement task force, within a month we started putting females in the grand jury and having them testify under oath, facing anywhere from 16 to 20 individuals from the Eastern District of Wisconsin who were listening to their testimony to decide if there was probable cause that a crime had been committed. And I started charging the pimps late 2008. And then at that time I started doing training throughout the state for both law enforcement as well as state prosecutors. And I have to say that, well, it took a good year or a little bit more for the Milwaukee DA's office to catch on and say, hey, we can prosecute these pimps. We can convict these pimps. We can get long sentences on these pimps. Once they caught on to that, they have jumped in wholeheartedly. And there are many more prosecutions going on in the district attorney's office in Milwaukee County, even more so than in federal courts. So one of our speakers talked about the role of the press. I have to commend especially the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel for profiling so many of these cases and describing for its readers in the horrible factual detail what these men did to these women, and putting it on the front page with a color picture of a pimp that we've arrested and we have sitting in jail. We have very strong state statutes and very strong federal statutes. As Dana Worrell Patterson talked about, in 2000 the federal statute was drafted. And again, our office didn't use it until 2008. And that statute has been amended a number of times to make it stronger for prosecutors and easier for prosecutors. The current statute, which is called Sex Trafficking of Children or by Force, Fraud, and Coercion, the new amendment adds to it a provision that allows federal prosecutors to prosecute a customer of a trafficked minor. The federal sex trafficking statutes, if you traffic as a pimp, if you traffic a minor and you're convicted, it's 10 years to life. In other words, a judge cannot sentence below 10 years a convicted pimp. If that pimp used force, fraud, or coercion on a minor or an adult, the minimum mandatory sentence is 15 years and the maximum is life. And the federal judges have gotten the picture. They've understood what was happening, and we have gotten very, very high sentences. Sentences on guilty pleas. A pimp pleading guilty who gets 25 years in prison, no parole, 20 years in prison, no parole, going to trial, 30 years in prison, no parole. And the state court judges, Judge Dallet and a number of the other judges who are in the specialized unit for homicide, sexual assault, have been giving correspondingly high sentences to these awful, awful criminals. So I want to close by saying, as a prosecutor and having done many, many large-scale cases, very large drug conspiracies, large, very complex financial fraud prosecutions, these cases are the hardest cases that I have ever prosecuted of any other cases, any other type of case, whatever it has to be. And the reason is your witnesses are these victims. And there, for the most part, there is a strong emotional, romantic, or simply psychological bond between these victimized girls and that pimp. And you have to either peel these victims off, you have to get the pimp in, you've got to charge the pimp, get him detained, or put very, very high bail on him, listen to his jail calls, which are fascinating, and then you have to separate these young ladies from this pimp. And then you have to gain their trust, and you have to encourage them and get them to tell the truth about the most horrible things that have ever happened to them. And then you have to put them in front of a grand jury, and they have to testify in front of up to 20 people about what happened. And trying to keep track of these women, trying to get them services, trying to find the ones, especially the younger ones who are chronic runaways, in getting ready for trial is a huge undertaking. These are very, very, very difficult cases to prosecute. And I just want to close by again emphasizing this is an epidemic in Milwaukee. It's an absolute epidemic in this county and in many large cities, but I think in Milwaukee it's much worse. And again, poverty is a huge factor in the cultivation of these victims. Thank you very much.
Let's give it up again for Judge Wall. Thought he did an outstanding job. Okay, before we close, we have several people that would like to come up, that are in line to come up and make a statement. Okay.
Hey, Martha, you must have read my mind. This is what I would have said. Who in our community or person who really feels that a certain situation exists, like I would not call the police, because if I am mistaken on what I feel might be human trafficking, it could cause unrealized havoc or unjust reality for the innocent. So when you have no time to initiate, but at the same time we know what exists in our community, and is there a private entity that would be available to discuss on an individual level outside of me handing out cards, which I've run out of? It would be a start. So I was going to ask this question, who could be called or notified, but I already got 3 people that I can call and notify, just to let you know that this forum did give me some information, and they will be hearing from me, and I'll tell you the names. One will be the attorney, one is going to be Dennis, one is going to be Bevan Baker.
Oh, good, good. Next.
Good morning, I'm Pam Malone. Within the last few days, there was an article in the Journal Sentinel. I'm kind of looking for information. In the Journal Sentinel, I think it was about a 16-year-old on the near south side. She was walking with her boyfriend, the same age, and another juvenile. And a man drove up and rode next to them in a car and asked could he have the 16-year-old for about an hour. And I'm trying to figure out, does anybody know, did anybody see that? Okay, is that a high crime area for sex trafficking? I mean, I can't figure out what led this man to believe, unless he lived where I used to live. Oh, it was on, I'm not sure, it was the near south side. Yeah, no. Okay. So that means if a young lady is walking down the street, even if she's accompanied by her boyfriend and somebody else, somebody can just drive up and ask for her. Oh, Lord. Oh, thank you.
Good morning. There are only 2 organizations in this city, in this county, in this state that cover all the nonprofits, cover all the groups and all the agencies and all the courts, and that's the 2 political parties. Why aren't they organized better and doing something about this? Not only this, but when we come to the poverty issue, when we come to income inequality, it exacerbates the whole problem. And we're not doing enough about it. My major advocacy for people who know me is Medicare for everybody. If everybody had Medicare, we would reduce the cost of medical coverage by at least 10% in this country. We could have more jobs. We'd have more money to use in cases like this. So where are the political parties in this problem? And I want to add that Martha Love, of course, is one of our representatives to the National Democratic Committee. So she's there. I'd like to hear from Martha what's going on in Washington in the DNC office. And I've sat there. I've been there. But I didn't see any of this stuff going on.
My friend Eugene. Actually, several years ago when our President Barack Obama was elected, one of the first things that he did was to go to the United Nations Council and declare human trafficking an epidemic in the United States of America. He got a motion from the Council, United Nations, to prioritize eradication of human trafficking throughout the world. So the Democratic Party, as well as the Republican Party, they have been working very closely with Representative Gwen Moore, our U.S. Senator Tammy Baldwin, to eradicate and to change a lot of policies that will help our men and women and transgenders be safe. As you heard on the radio, there was a press conference with the Benedict Center. Now here in the city, instead of women and men and transgenders and others being arrested for prostitution, they now have the option of going to treatment. So that is a law that we're so happy that the Police Chief Flynn has now recognized that treatment is far better than victimization of victims that's on the streets.
Martha, thank you for putting on the program. Judge Wall, thank you for recognizing the role that I played. In 2005, when I first was elected to the legislature, I introduced the first human trafficking bill, and it didn't go anywhere. In 2007, I reintroduced the trafficking bill, and the Republicans said, we're not going to pass this with you as the principal author on it. And I had to withdraw it because I felt it was very important that we pass it. A woman from Menominee Falls was named as the principal author, and I became the second author on that because they didn't want to give credit to a Democrat. In 2009, that did pass. In 2009, there was one issue that was very concerning to me, and LaTanya Johnson was just elected to the legislature, and I told LaTanya, I want you to take the bill for strengthening human trafficking at that time. And one of the real problems that we have, which has now been addressed, was that when we had juvenile women arrested, they were immediately charged on their CCAP file and everything like that, which ultimately is available as prostitutes. That was devastating if you ever turned around and reformed. And we tried to get this situation where they could be held as victims instead of that. That was a problem, and Joe touched on that. That was a difficult problem. But we felt, those of us who were talking about this, said this had to be addressed. At the time, Attorney General Milw would not go along with us. But I think 2 years later, we were able to turn that around, and we were able to get that area corrected so that these women who are arrested as juveniles are not labeled for the rest of their life as prostitutes. And that, to me, was one of the things that I did not want to have happen. So, again, thank you. I just wanted to add that in to the history that we've had here. And this is an issue that obviously concerns me. But I also want to say there's also a second aspect of trafficking that we also have to be concerned about, and that's economic exploitation. That also is part of that, and we've seen particularly from the East Asian area where women from the Philippines were brought in as basically slaves. And that's also an issue that they were made as maids and things like that. That's also occurred in the Milwaukee area, and that also has to be addressed and worked on. Thank you.
Hi there. I wanted to ask a question for our panelists because I'm running for Attorney General and we have some other people running for office here and we have some policy makers here. So it's a unique opportunity, I think, for you all to talk about what we can do better, what people who are elected to office can do better, what candidates can talk about better, to start addressing this problem more broadly. I know for a fact that Martha Love has thoughts on this because she has told me about them. And I think it would be great for you to talk about those here, but I'm also curious what the other panelists think. I believe it was Natalie in the back who's dealt with some of these issues. To the extent you have thoughts on what we can be doing better from a state level, I think that would be interesting to hear too. So I'll get out of the way, but I'm very curious what you all think.
I just want to speak about the core issue. In other words, the core issue that seems to be how we are falling from our original establishment. We had education in the system. We had prayer in the system. We had prayer in our education system. So prayer is the key. And if we go back and establish on a solid rock and a solid ground and a solid foundation, I feel that everybody would be more highly appreciated of our system and follow the structure instead of falling away from it. We'll be growing in the system because we'll be going in the right direction because we have eternity to pay for and we are taking ourselves further away.
Hi, my name is Andrew. Thank you, everyone. I'm working with the state on a communications effort to address these problems. My question is about social media. A lot of research that we're doing deals with the effects of communication and with gender violence in general and sex trafficking. I guess, what do you see on social media and in terms of what we can do to help? How can we address that through communications? Oh, I'm with Creative Marketing Resources. Do you know Jackie? Yeah. So yeah, we're here to help. I'm curious to how we can help.
Hi, my name's Heather Elsvik, and my question piggybacks on his. And I've been learning about this issue of human trafficking through Martha Love and Dana World Patterson over the past couple years, but I want to say this panel was exceptionally informative, and I really appreciate the depth and breadth of those who represented, and I thought it was, I learned a lot more today. And so my question is just, what 3 things, and it's so hard to distill, but for those of us here today to take 3 actions. I know I took some notes, and I'm planning to post about them on Facebook today and tag all of you all, because that helps get the message out. But if there were 3 things that we could do, maybe it's a small step that we could incorporate into our lives today, or like Mr. Baker, Commissioner Baker said we could do tomorrow morning. Please just give us some simple or 3 direct actions we could take. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. So Andy Gronick, you're running for governor. Do you believe that human sex trafficking is a problem in our community? And will you pledge, as governor, to help the citizens of the state of Wisconsin to eradicate human trafficking? Say it again. Yes, I will. Say it again. Yes, I will. So everybody heard what he said, right? We're going to hold him to that. Now, are there any other candidates that's running for governor in the room? No more candidates running for governor. If there were, I would ask them the same thing. But we're going to conclude, but not before Dana World Patterson give you 3 reasons. Dennis, did you want to give one as well? Any of the others? Okay, we will have our panelists quickly conclude, because Judge Stamper is getting impatient with me right now. So, oh, see, he gave me the stick.
For me, I'm going to just give the most important one for me. Like I said, my role in this community as an organizer, I work with men, I work with fathers. I think being a father and understanding the importance of a role of a father is the most critical thing that we can do as men. And for those of the men in our community who are not fathers, our job should be to bring forth the next generation of fathers, those of us who are. So when we talk about family restoration through responsible fatherhood, that is where I'm advocating to get men to take personal responsibility for their issues in their communities and in their families. And we have to encourage men when we talk about the restoration and the renewal of family and being that presence, because that's where a huge divide is in our community, and we have to really take that into consideration when we talk about repair and bringing balance back to our communities. Men, if they're not encouraged in that way, when we talk about the family institution, then we don't have the values. We have to reset the values when we talk about the importance of fatherhood and family. So,
I also think it's very important to stay informed, to continue to learn, and invoke conversation, because as we know the truth and we invoke these conversations, then we'll be able to, as they say, a rising tide lifts all boats. So everyone isn't into it, but those who are, if we can lift the tide, rise the tide, so that we can have healthy conversations to begin to invoke these things within our community, instead of always hearing what we are not and how we are the worst, I think that will help. Also, being informed and volunteering. If you have energy, come and volunteer at our organizations. Create opportunities. If you have access to the newspapers, the radio, or your organizations, where we can continue to talk about not only the plight of what's happening around human trafficking, but solutions and the hope. I'm telling you, yes, there's wind beneath our wings, but it's because we see hope, and we have hope as well. We're working with survivor leaders that are now getting involved in the community. We're having conversations with former hustlers and former traffickers that are wanting to give back to the community. We're needing to turn the tide towards those who have also increased the demand, those who are the Johns or the predators, the rapists, those for them to come out so that we can draw down the demand if they're willing to come out and receive help. So there's a lot that we can do, and I appreciate you all just coming and learning. Also taking the pledge today, standing up publicly, and having those conversations with other men. We're going to move the needle, and every day that we do this, we're eradicating human trafficking. I always say that one less victim in Milwaukee is one less in the world. So we are making a difference. It's not a sprint, it's a journey. So just stay on the path and do what you can do, and we really appreciate it.
They gave more than 3. I would say also just connect with young people in our community. I think we've all heard, and Judge Wall, and my experience and everyone's here, is that the young people really seem to be the most vulnerable. We all have young people in our lives, so I would say just keep an eye on them, talk about them, and find out how their friends are doing. So, just so we all are aware of what's going on in their lives. I think that's really important.
I agree with that. Prevention is worth more than a pound of cure. So as we create opportunities to talk to young people about the plight of human trafficking, sexual exploitation, these things that are going on within our community before they get to that point, I believe that we're, again, making strides, moving the needle towards the eradication of human trafficking. So, yeah.
All right.
Judge Wall.
Thank you.
Well, when I speak to community groups about this problem, and I usually tell a story about one of my victims who is combined all of my child victims. Of course, there's outrage in the audience, and then there's the questions why, and then what can we do? And there's always 3 things I talk about, and our other speakers have talked about all 3. The first is inform yourself. The fact that you're here shows that you're interested in the issue. There is so much out there, whether it's on the internet or wherever, that you can read to understand the breadth of this problem and the depth of this problem, and then get outraged, because you will once you read about it. The second thing is to vote for children. What does that mean? When I was at Children's Court, I was driving one day, and I was listening to a radio talk show speaker, and he was criticizing 4-year-old kindergarten. And he was saying it's simply taxpayer-funded child care. And my immediate thought was, again, as a children's court judge at the time, we don't need 4-year-old kindergarten. We need 3-year-old kindergarten and 4-year-old kindergarten. And we need to be feeding a hot breakfast to all these children who come to school hungry. And we need to make sure that they have a good lunch for the ones who are living in a crisis environment. And we need to have after-school programming for the susceptible children where they can go, be safe, and learn. Vote for children. Vote for those people who will actually lead us instead of trying to follow us. People who say, these programs are going to cost money. And your response is, well, of course they're going to cost money, but they're worth it. Spend $1 now and save $10 in the future. And the last thing is, as the speakers have talked about, is getting involved. There are things you can do. There are community groups that you can get involved with. We don't have enough services for these trafficked females, especially the minors. And you can make contributions to those entities that do serve them. Thank you.
Lastly, I'd like to leave with you. I know that poverty has come up, but as former General Attorney J.B. Van Hollen said, human trafficking is occurring in all 72 counties. That means up the road in Mequon, down in Kenosha, Racine. If we go into Appleton and Oshkosh, let's not keep in our minds that this is just poverty individuals. If we think that way, we're back when we started 9 years ago, where the narrative was inner city, black girl, no eating flour and water, just pitiful. We have to expand our minds or we'll never look in our backyards. So thank you for that.
Thank you. I would like to thank everyone that agreed to be the community panel, and they are experts. I want to thank everyone that came today. There's a lot going on, but I want to thank you for coming for the update on human trafficking. As long as I have breath, and as long as they allow me to be on Community Brainstorming. By the way, will the members of Community Brainstorming Executive Committee please stand? These are my colleagues that I work with on Community Brainstorming, and I really appreciate them. We appreciate Jackie Bowles from Creative Marketing wanting to do something around the state about getting the message out. What I have seen around social media, and what I try to do a lot of now that I know how to use it, is sending articles to Facebook and calling it to the attention of everyone. So I want to thank MATA Community Media. I want to thank Martha Love, producer and director of what's going on. This is the taping that's being provided today. You will see this program over and over and over and over again. Over and over again. And I happen to be the president of MATA Board of Directors. Wow, wonderful. With that, thank you all, and here's the Honorable Judge Russell Stamper.
Thank you, Martha. Thank you very much. Thank you to our panelists. We certainly appreciate your time, your energy, your experience, your expertise, your wisdom. We thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for coming. We will be here again next fourth Saturday in the month of August. We will have a panel on the violence in our community. We're fortunate to have Brother David Muhammad here. He's come to inspect the premises, and look forward to seeing all of you next time. Thank you. He's got a pad and paper, and he's taking names. No, I'm just kidding. But do come join us. We will be here on the same theme or similar theme of violence in our community.
An MCM production.